by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Tonight on Frontline, today's Soviet Union. How much are things changing? A look at that question with an American family who lived in Moscow 20 years ago and sent their children to Soviet schools. Tonight, for the first time, they are back in the USSR.
From the network of public television stations, a presentation of KCTS Seattle, WNET New York, WPBT Miami, WTVS Detroit, and WGBH Boston. This is Frontline with Judy Woodruff.
Good evening. Since Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union 3 years ago this month, his public statements have been filled with promises to bring a new openness and fundamental economic change to his country. But while we have heard much from the Soviet leader about the new Russia, there have been few opportunities to hear about these changes from the Soviet people. Tonight, we travel inside the Soviet Union with an American family who lived in Moscow 20 years ago and returned last fall to search for old friends and to take some measure of the changes Gorbachev has promised. Frontline negotiated with the Soviet government to obtain unusual access to the Russian people. Our team was allowed to bypass government officials and to make its own direct contacts with Soviet citizens. In our experience, this was a first. The result is an intimate, candid, and revealing portrait of the Soviet people we met, openly discussing the horrors of their past, the realities of today, and their hopes and fears for the future. Our program was produced by Sherry Jones and photographed by Foster Wiley. It is called Back in the USSR.
Oh. Yeah, why don't I put them in for what are you doing? The potatoes.
They were once called an American family in Moscow. That was 20 years ago, when Jerry Schechter was the Moscow bureau chief for Time magazine, and he and his wife Leona and their 5 children lived for 2 years in the Soviet Union.
Where are you?
I'm not in the picture.
How come?
I don't know.
Hey, look, there's signature in Russian. Really? Yeah.
Gerald,
can you read it? Yeah.
Together, they wove their stories into a book about life there. This year, they decided to go back.
It's great to be together with you all. And, let's have fun, huh?
When the Schechter family was here 20 years ago, they wrote that Moscow was the living past. They called it a stagnant society that did not change. Today, it is the Soviet Union of Mikhail Gorbachev, and they have come to find old friends, visit familiar places, to see for themselves if it's different, if things have changed. For 3 months, they'll be back in the USSR. When they lived in Moscow before, Jerry and Leona chose to live in an apartment away from the American enclave. They sent their children to Russian schools. Those experiences were at the heart of their book. Steve was 11 then. His sister Evelyn was 13. Their brother Barney was 5. Dovine was 7. And Kate was 9. Now, along with Kate's husband, Ari, and their other spouses, the entire family has come back to write the sequel. Headquarters will be the Hotel Berlin, just off Dujinski Square. There's no such thing as a telephone book here, but by tracking down old friends among the city's journalists, intellectuals, artists, and writers,
And these are the bad writers, not the Russian.
they set to work. They assume certain rules haven't changed in 20 years, that even their old friends will distrust any new contacts they might make, that protecting some of those friends means phone calls still have to be made from the street. And because Soviets are still not allowed in hotels where foreigners are housed, the Schechter family must go out to meet people and compare the life here today with their experience of 20 years ago. Attending this school had been one experience that was uniquely theirs. The Schechters were the only Americans in any Russian school. Special School 47. Special because the students are taught English beginning in the 2nd grade. They had worn exactly the same uniforms, walked the very same halls.
I went to 1st grade here, too. I went here when I was little.
Да, Гошка. А как сказать собака? Да, хорошо.
Good morning.
Это не инженерка, это первый час. Так, за команду Буратино. Так, Андрюш, пожалуйста, за команду Буратино.
They had listened to history lessons that glorified the Soviet Union and criticized the United States. And their mother had written that in this Soviet school, her children were never allowed to ask questions or argue.
3, 4, 8, 7, 1. 8, 2 и 6. Второй множитель 4. Но произведение Андрей Суходолов осталось такое же?
Произведение осталось такое же 12.
Так, 12. Хорошо, садись. Вопрос, о какой части речи?
I recognize you. I remember you were in the same class as Misha Yurubinsky. He's also gotten so big now and has 2 children.
I mean, she doesn't even change to her. Nothing has changed about her. Turquoise on thing. I know. It's amazing. I mean, she smells her warmth and the way she gives me a big wet kiss.
You know, when I cleaned up the class after, это наше звено, да? Then I used to argue with my Lena, I think. She was we were cleaning up the class together, and she would say, Americans do this bad, they do that bad. expect. There's so much racism there, and you're just a slave to the capitalists there. You could tell me all these kind of things and argue with them. I think it's changed since then, no? That was a long time ago.
Americans are so very happy, you know, they're, you can always talk with them about anything you wish. And I think Russians are too
communicative.
Yeah. Not uncommunicative, but it's rather difficult to communicate with Russian on the street because maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Why are you asking me?
Well, on the street, people have, you know, certain ideas. The right way and the wrong way. The wrong way. In America, it's much more free-flowing.
We see for our press, well, some years ago they wrote only, well, bad things, only politics about America. And now we just hear about, just read about life in America.
Prep school, American children work. They sell ice cream or hot dogs or something else.
It's true.
We need money in summertime. Even
Not only in summertime.
Yeah, we want to work in summertime.
We were afraid for some time to speak openly, and now we're not afraid.
Really?
And you see, we became more communicated.
So when do you think that started?
Sorry.
When do you think that change started?
Maybe 2 years ago. 3 years ago. 3 years ago.
You feel it yourself, huh?
Yes.
In the last 3 years, Mikhail Gorbachev has launched an immense experiment in the Soviet Union, trying to move a country of 280 million people who, in only 70 years, have lived through revolution, civil war, invasion, famine, Stalin's purges. It is a country beset with problems. Gorbachev's actions are fueled by that, by the need to revive a society numbed by so many years of totalitarian rule. The changes are happening, he tells them, though not as fast as we might want, because it can't all happen at once.
Нет, ну я могу сказать, что само сознание людей изменилось.
The very consciousness of people has changed. It has changed so that people are more willing to make real decisions. They are freer and, without a doubt, more enthusiastic.
20 years ago, they couldn't have had these conversations. Today, everyone talks about two things: perestroika, economic changes that will affect the way they work and live, and glasnost, a new openness.
You say everything you think so forthrightly. If you had a conversation like this in America, would anyone get angry with you? They wouldn't.
We can say what we want, even if Reagan doesn't agree with us.
That's democracy for you. Wonderful. We have perestroika now. We're trying to make life better and better so that someday we can live like you.
Many young people have already carved out a life that seems familiar, like the crowd at this unofficial fashion show.
Forget New York, forget Paris, you're going to India?
Doveen shares their interest in fashion, They are always eager to make contact with anyone from the West. They are mostly the children of party members and therefore privileged, though they are not party members themselves.
Do you think that if it was different here, like it is in America, where you can be active in politics as a young person, would you be active here? Would you?
Sure, you could be politically active, but nobody wants to.
What does it mean to be politically active?
What does it mean? Well, there's lots of different things you can do. You can have demonstrations, you can write letters, you can write petitions, you can write to Congress.
I want the borders to be open so we can travel to see all our friends. That's my only wish.
I think that if the borders were open and you came to a party in New York, or you spent a week with me and my friends, and you came back here, there would be a revolution. Because you would see how different it is, what you can say, where you can go, how you can live. It's so different.
We understand that, and sometimes we get angry about it. We have to imagine the whole world, like a fairy tale, an ideal.
But the Americans, what do they have?
They travel, see things, so what?
What are you saying?
He's trying to say that when we sit there and watch TV and we see how people live in Italy, when you watch TV and then the next day if you want to go to Italy, you just go to Italy and you have nothing to worry about. You have no dreams.
Oh, I see.
It's a time in Moscow when everyone seems to have an opinion about what's going on. Through an American friend, they find Sasha, an underground artist whose work has been shown in the United States. Skeptical of the promises of glasnost and change, he and his wife even kept their daughter out of the state kindergarten.
We want her to be a normal person, without the influence and opinions of the official dialogue.
We're her parents. We love her more than the government does, so we look after her.
Now we have a problem that arose from her first day of first grade. She came home and said that in the first lesson of peace, the teacher cursed America and said America drops atom bombs and wants war. For Lisa, this was very surprising, because we have many American friends and she loves them, and they love her. It was very hard for her.
Did you think that it was dangerous or not?
That we kept her out of kindergarten?
You're not worried about it?
Of course we worried. When she went to first grade, it was for us a serious trial, because we don't have good memories of our own school experience. She said now she's scared to go to school tomorrow because they will ask her about today. What will you tell them tomorrow?
If they start to ask me, I will just say people came to see us, but they weren't Americans. They were just people who came from another place.
Just friends, right?
Just Daddy's friends.
And then it'll be clear who Daddy's friends are.
The cat also wants to say something. Sarah wants to say that she also knows what school means. Tell them, Sarah. You have to be careful in school. You shouldn't spread any family secrets.
This is a country of keeping secrets, and for some, the strain of living hidden lives eventually leads to the decision to emigrate.
Our decision to leave was protest of style of life here. It is atmosphere of double thinking and constant life. And we tried to live our own way, and we didn't want to participate in the style of life. And so we brought up our daughter in another way, of course. Never lie, never double thinking, and it was very hard.
For them, it's been even harder in the 30 years since Khrushchev relaxed censorship and allowed freer debate, because he also provided a glimpse then of a different kind of life.
We are people who lived through Khrushchev's times, and we see much in common between what Gorbachev is doing now and what Khrushchev did in his time, even though this is a new cycle.
They've seen things turn around before. When Khrushchev came under fire, the first to suffer were the intellectuals who had bought into his promises of change.
Everyone who wants the changes to continue is afraid that they won't.
Everybody from their generation.
People of our generation are much more afraid of that than the young people are, because they didn't see what we saw when everything was shut down before. All thoughtful people hope perestroika won't stop. They're afraid. People our age lived through the disappointment of Khrushchev's times. That was a time of bitter disappointment.
Khrushchev was the last to attempt significant reform here, so it remains a society rigidly controlled, from where they can travel to where they can live. For many, less freedom is a trade for the certainty that the system will find them a place, provide a job. But the economy is failing. Even 20 years ago, the most efficient producers were the few private owners who were allowed to operate, like those who sell at Moscow's central market. By promoting this sort of profit and competition, Gorbachev promises to cure an economy that yields shortages and long lines.
I would say that nobody says that perestroika is unnecessary. Everyone agrees that this is a very important stage in the life of our country. And perestroika...
Vladimir Nedelyan is editor of the letters department of the newspaper Izvestia, where he receives 7,000 letters every week. In a country with no public opinion polls, it's a way to understand people's hopes as well as their fears.
Today my column is about personal desire to take part in the process of perestroika, and about fear of some kind of people. You know, he says, for example, can you guarantee that one day you will not be published as anti-Leninist, and they will remember who wrote, who criticized, and so on? Can you give such a guarantee? No, you cannot. So we feel fear. In such decisive moments in history of any country, and especially in the history of this country, it is natural, I think.
In our society, we have this kind of built-in mechanism. Namely, every 4 years, if you don't like the leader, you change him.
No. It's quite different. It is a change of a leader in the White House. We are talking now about the deep, fundamental changes in a society. It's quite different.
The fear of change is deeply rooted. Gorbachev relies on journalists, like these top editors of Izvestia, to press the need for reform and open the way for a more honest discussion of the country's problems.
And we now trying to do our best to make the same mechanism in our country. Not the same as you have, of course. Not the same, but built in.
You see,
and it may be founded only on democracy.
Sometimes we are even ahead of you.
And democracy.
You need 4 years to change a leader. We need just 1 hour sometimes.
Our people perhaps has got much less of material goods than yours.
but they have a lot of guarantees, such as the right to work, the right to have a house. And this is, you know, what we are accustomed to.
You are opportunists. You look a place in which you can realize your potentials better, earn better, and live better. And that's why you gamble. We don't gamble.
But I disagree with this. The first thing, we have some restrictions, for example, to live in every city you want, named as propiska. It's not under the Constitution. It's against our Constitution. We must get rid of this. We must do something with this propiska. It prevents us from going from one city to other, from one region to other.
Why is it so difficult to get rid of this? People here receive living quarters for free. It's not as though if I have money I can move to a different city and buy myself a place to live. At factories there are waiting lists for apartments. If I came to a factory and bought myself an apartment, I'd disturb the whole order of things. If I buy an apartment with money, then another person can't get it for free.
Propiska is manifestation of our economic shortcomings.
No, it's manifestation of the way how we distribute, how we distribute all we have. The way of distribution of flats, of compartment, I think is wrong. Principally wrong.
And this situation, we call it Uravnilovka, when you work bad and I work good, and we have the same salary. Where is my incentive?
We must honestly admit that there are people who say, let me live worse, but don't let him live any better.
Lot of problems. But otherwise it would be tough.
That's right.
It's impossible, you see, from the womb of your mother, make a jump and start to build a new society. And we tried to do it. See? We tried to be clever by half. We said we can quicken the historical development because of the introduction of socialism, and we will skip all these difficulties which capitalism has. Now we are witnessing our mistakes, that our expectations were too great and unjustified. And sometimes we have to retreat and to start from scratch.
Из сотни лучших объяснений того, что происходит.
It means that you can find hundred other explanations which are as best as mine.
"20 years ago, people were arrested for saying what's now published and sold at every newsstand. The system itself has become the issue. But why now? Is it all because of Gorbachev? Or has something been building over the years among some of the people themselves?" They were the family's closest friends, two couples who dared to befriend Americans. It was the kind of intense friendship one finds here, based both on honesty and humor about life and living in Moscow.
The plumber said there's a hole, and the hole needs to be fixed. We have to replace everything. This is bad, and that's bad, and that's bad, and we have to throw it all out and start over. What can I do, Ivan Petrovich? Help me, please. What can I do? I don't know.
You can't fix it at all?
No, it'll keep on breaking. So he says, okay, I'll try and get you the parts you need tomorrow, but certainly you realize it's not going to be easy. Don't worry, I tell him. We'll find a way of showing our gratitude. I'll come tomorrow at 11. No, 12. I have to work tomorrow. Oh, well, in that case, I don't know what to do. Okay. So you sit and wait all day and skip work. If something breaks, it's a disaster.
No matter how long the shopping lines, nor how small the apartment, nothing is spared when friends arrive. Dissidents 20 years ago, they have good jobs now. And that is a measure of how, in the years the Schechters were gone, change was already coming.
Because Gorbachev was prepared at that time, and the reforms were prepared at that time, and the psychology...
They see themselves as the children of Khrushchev. Their fathers were the children of Stalin.
People of my father's generation, when they crossed the Red Square, they didn't even, it was even not possible to look. It was not impossible, but they were feeling not comfortable.
But it was better not to look.
Better not to look, you see. Better not to meet foreigners. Better not to speak to them. Now, there are different ways to behave. You may choose the official career, and then you will be very constrained in your behavior. But you can choose. And this is quite possible. It's not dangerous. So we do not know the danger, maybe. But I think it's not. And of course, it's the different mentality, I think, already.
But that's some progress, then.
Yes, of course, of course.
What one begins to understand is that glasnost did not come out of nowhere. The generation that came of age during Khrushchev's time saw the possibility of change. And though their hopes were disappointed, they weren't all destroyed. An entire intelligentsia went underground to wait. From the beginning, people with original ideas or vision have been forced to choose self-denial, prison, or exile. One of them was the painter, Marc Chagall, who fled a country whose heart and soul has often been suppressed, hidden. This year, when he would have been 100, this first retrospective brought many of his paintings home. Like Chagall, there are still Jews here for whom life is intolerable. Jadwiga and Ben Charney are two. Though their daughter has been allowed to leave, they are among the refuseniks who are still denied the necessary permission.
But when I applied, they fight me. That was a very common thing for refuseniks. I don't know whether this fact or others affected me, but I got sick with cancer just a year after I had applied.
We have a relative who wanted to get a job where Ben worked. His passport says that he's Russian, but he has a Jewish name, Brachman. So the guy who wanted to hire him said, with a name like that, I'd be better off taking a Jew. We're talking about names here, and this system was so well established that my daughter was deprived of opportunities. Everything she accomplished was accomplished with such difficulty that we just couldn't live that way.
What was it like at the airport when Anna was leaving?
Да, это очень тяжелое время.
That was a very difficult time, but I'll try to tell you about it.
Конечно, оно облегчалось тем, что
Of course, it's been made easier because I hope that it won't last for long.
как будто черта.
It's as if there's a wall in front of you. One minute she's here, and the next minute she's somewhere beyond that wall.
Ну, вообще, это же не естественно.
It's simply unnatural to separate parents and children that way.
Unnatural to tear parents and children apart.
Я не хочу сказать, что я за
But I don't want to say that I
ругаю
blame the
советский
Soviet
власть.
government for that.
Переведи, Катя.
Translate that, Katya.
No. She doesn't want to say that she blames Soviet.
Я за это не ругаю
Не
советскую
ругаю.
власть.
She doesn't.
Нет, потому что я не могу ругать
I
власть
can't blame the
за то,
government for something that I'm happy
чем я
about.
доволен. Я
I'm
всё
very
равно
happy that she
довольна,
left,
что она уехала.
because the life of a refusenik
Жизнь
is...
отказника такая,
It's impossible to
что
live
так
that
нельзя.
way.
After 8 years of trying, Anna, her husband, and child left for the United States. They've been gone just a month.
It was an emotional time here for Anna Charney because it was one of joy and pain. As you found out, she left behind in Moscow her mother and her father, who is suffering from cancer and a heart condition, and the Soviets won't let him go. It was difficult enough to get Anna Charney here, and the family says the struggles and the tears were worth it in the end. I still remember the face of my father at the airport. It was pain and happiness at the same time in his eyes. Happiness that Simmer, my daughter, and I will be free. And pain because I'm sure she thought she would never see me again.
We also have some mushrooms. Should we save them for tonight? Let's have mushrooms now.
Don't you want to try that squid?
The canned squid?
Yeah, nobody wants to eat my squid.
And wait, why don't you eat it yourself, Dad?
Well, I need some party souls to... But people still are not sure about what's going on, don't you think? I mean, some people are speaking out and they're taking risks, and they think that, you know, maybe
It's like
that's
the,
going to...
the level of discourse has risen
Yeah.
to a new level,
Yeah.
but the ground rules are basically still the same.
Yeah.
That you gotta watch your behind.
Well, even the friends who say
Spoke of ironically.
they're not worried about coming to the hotel. They still say, please meet me exactly, at 1 o'clock downstairs, so that I don't have to be down there.
They get harassed.
And one of the things that they have here now that we don't have, which is the reason we came here, is that there's a real excitement in the air. There's a sense of national renewal. There's a real feeling that people are trying to do something. They're trying to rebuild the country. And sure, they have problems. Sure, it's a gargantuan task. But the fact is that you meet like the editor of Izvestia or the editor of Aganyok, and these guys are on fire. It's the time of their lives, and they're spreading it. And I think that's what's that's what we don't have that they do have.
I think there's a lot of cheerleading going on here, and some of it is very effective.
Yeah, but that's a real cheapening of it to say it's cheerleading.
Dad, what if there is a backlash?
That's right.
They're the first ones whose heads will roll for being un-Leninist. Those people who stuck their necks out and put big slogans up in Izvestia saying, oh, we've got to look at the past and come to grips with what really happened before, are the ones who will suffer. So you can say they're cheerleaders right now, but the other side of the coin is they're taking a risk with their very lives.
I didn't mean to imply that they weren't, that didn't take courage and bravery to be a cheerleader.
Gorbachev's most loyal allies are the thinkers, writers, and dreamers. If he falls, so do they. This group is Sovremenyak Theater 2, named after the first contemporary theater established in Khrushchev's time. A year ago, they were underground. Their director is Misha Yefremov, was the son of the founder of Sovremennik I.
Everyone's afraid of one thing, that it will all get covered up again. That already happened once, more than once. And to keep them from covering this back up, we need to push this thing that's happening now farther and farther open. Then it'll be impossible to cover it back up.
They're young, they say, and determined to stretch the boundaries of glasnost. This 25-year-old play satirizes political corruption, but it also assails the people who acquiesce to a government of lies. It has never before been seen by the public.
Сегодня я узнал, что некоторые юноши из отдельных знаков семей собираются, да, у моего брата Нестора, и ведут недостойные и больные беседы. Это заговор, Алгей.
Дай мне вот это желтое. Ну когда я появляюсь, я не знаю,
I don't know why people laugh when I appear.
А когда вешают ордена, это...
When I wear medals, I guess it's a very familiar thing.
Потому что у нас, ну вот Леонид Ильич Брежнев,
because,
там просто
well,
ходили
Brezhnev,
анекдоты,
we have a joke about him, about how he had an operation to make his chest bigger so he could wear more
Ну а
medals.
если для кого-то это обидно, для тех,
If someone is offended by
это
this, well,
замечательно,
that's just fantastic.
Нам не нужно ничего! Да, мы живем плохо. Мы трусливым и невежественным и глупы. Но нас же это не тяготит, ты же видишь. Да, ты прав. Мы срослись с Атой. Но нас ведь это устраивает. Пусть не всех, но многих. Большинство! Люди внутренние.
People on the inside will stay just as they are, with their own wishes and their own internal guilt, complexes. And if they say they will change, they aren't telling the truth.
Вот
ты! Ты в этом Холливуде всю жизнь превращался в скотину, а ты человек! Ты только поверь, ты понюхай! Понюхай, как ты живешь! Вот надо Бостон! Дерьмо! Чтобы вы поняли!
При Сталине ни один партийный работник не мог спать спокойно. Переводите сразу.
Да. Under Stalin, no party worker could sleep peacefully.
И когда человек
Arsenio Roginsky is a dissident historian who was sent to a labor camp 5 years ago.
He said anyone who had a high position knew that sooner or later he was going to get shot.
Потом пришел Никита. Никита все время все перемещал с места на место. Он все время менял министерства, колхозы, хозяйство, экономику. У него была сплошная перестройка. Много лет перестройки, понимаете?
He said, he was always moving things around. He was always restructuring.
Аппарат хотел одного – спать.
The apparat wanted one thing, that was to sleep.
И тогда пришел Брежнев. Всем давали железяки. Все спокойно уходили там, я не знаю, все спокойно жили. И дети устроены.
Everybody got a medal.
С орденами. И все
Everyone was
хорошо,
calm.
и все спокойно.
Everyone was satisfied.
Такое
It was like a
замечательное
wonderful,
сонное царство.
dream-like kingdom.
Все хорошо, все спят.
Everyone slept well.
А потом пришел Андропов.
And then came Andropov.
Он
He
никогда
never
не
smiled.
улыбался. Он никогда не улыбался. Это очень важно. Так, народ Андропова полюбил.
But the people loved Andropov.
Народ почему? Это
The
строгий
strict
отец.
papa had come.
Пришел строгий папа.
The strict father came, and that's why they loved Andropov.
Потом пришел Черненко.
Then came Chernenko.
Он был рамолик.
He was a real old fogey.
Ромали.
Ромали, ну, старый. А потом пришел Горбачев.
And then came Gorbachev.
Самое страшное в моей жизни, я как сейчас помню. В лагере
And the most frightening thing in my life happened. I was in the camp, and there was a special room for political work, where officers would tell us political information. And in this room hung a giant poster of the moral code of the builders of communism. Suddenly the door opened, and in walked the drunken boss of the camp police, saying, "Take it down." So I started to take down this poster that had hung there for over 20 years. And I said, "Why, Citizen Director?" And he said, "It's gotten old." I said, "What?" He said, "Everything has gotten old." And I understood there'd been a revolution. Once again, the apparat would not be able to sleep.
They are in the tradition of patriotic dissidents here. They choose to stay. They accept the risk. The friend who owned this apartment died in prison less than a year ago.
It was simply a moral position. If I wanted to say the truth, I understood I would go to prison for it. I said it, and I went, and that's all.
Sergei Kovalyov is a human rights activist who was released just this year after 7 years in prison and 3 years in internal exile. He is still forbidden from living in Moscow.
The movement was, as they sometimes say, like Don Quixote on Russian soil. And that's the right image.
We've had 70 years of history. During all those 70 years, there has been only 1 year, 1987, when not one new person under Article 70 was sent to prison. Because they haven't sent anyone to prison, we and many others can organize in peace, get together informally to read something, talk about something. The young people have begun to unite on their own, and very many of these groups have arisen. No one knows how many. Perhaps there are a few hundred, perhaps a few thousand, perhaps tens of thousands. It's impossible to count them.
Is there a possibility of a return to the past? Yes, of course. That always exists. I even think the chances are 50-50, or even greater. But there is also hope, which we must not allow ourselves to neglect.
Скоро целый год назад, и впереди ждут небеса, а сущие звездный ад. И вот теперь они вокруг, миллионом звездных рук, а роды и землю видим лишь во сне, и в далеком шальном огне.
Even as things change, the past here casts a long shadow. Not everyone agrees that things should be different. Not everyone wants them to be. Some don't believe the promises. Some don't care. It is a society struggling with itself, and thus struggling for its future. People trying to move forward by first coming to terms with the truth about their past. The official veil is officially being lifted. Plays, books, and movies are being taken from the censor's shelf. Millions of Soviets have seen this film, Repentance. It is a nightmare of Stalinist terror. It compels the audience to deal with an unresolved question. Was it just one man, or was it the system? One scene is painfully real. As happened in the time of Stalin's purges, word is passed among the women in a village that logs have arrived at the railway yard, bearing carved initials from prisoners in distant labor camps. This is their first sign of who is dead and who is alive. When history has been concealed, writers like Anatoly Pristavkin become the true historians. Like so many, his life was touched by Stalin. Like so many, he has led two lives until now, publishing acceptable stories, while the novels that are his life's work have been put belyom, hidden away in the linen drawer.
The tragedy of the people from a child's perception and a child's soul. When children burned in the flame that adults created. That is what my book is about. This is all that remains of my childhood.
As a child during the war, he was shipped to an orphanage in Siberia, where he survived by winning a game whose prize was a scrap of bread.
I was the orphanage champion. Don't show them.
No, not in any circumstance.
I'm sorry, I have to do it.
In Siberia, he saw Stalin's forced relocation of entire populations and the resulting famine that killed 7 million Soviet people.
And was your sister with you then?
Yes, my sister was then 5 years old. I even wrote in a story how she starved more than I, since I was 9 years old and I could steal. She was small, and her portion of bread was always stolen. When she got desperate, there was an aquarium. She would get up at night, catch a fish, and eat it alive. And this saved her life. But when they noticed the fish had disappeared, she was caught and badly beaten. The book calls to the world, because if the world can be cruel enough to destroy children, it's not worth anything. Naturally, when I touched on this in my novel, it frightened everyone. How can you tell about what happened then? What will people think? They'll think we've begun to tell the truth at last. We hid the tyranny which we tried to ignore. But if I'm wearing a white shirt and underneath there is a wound, the shirt does not eliminate the wound.
Why did you decide to stay?
There was never any question about it. I feel very close to the earth. By nature, I'm a farmer. I've always felt tied to the land, and I love Russian nature, the Russian countryside. I can't live without these things. I am a very deeply rooted person.
Years ago, the Schechter family had no farewell party. Suspicion and fear kept their friends apart. This night, on the eve of their departure, everyone was there. And this, they said, was a sign of just how much things have changed. Will the changes last? One friend answers, "We will know in a few years." Either everything will be possible then, or everything will be absolutely impossible.
From California, from the redwoods pouring to the Gulf Stream water, this land was made for you and me. Hey, you know more verses than I know.
Beginning this week, Frontline will rebroadcast an updated version of our 11-part series on the Soviet Union called Comrades, full of more revealing insights into the real life of the Soviet people. Comrades can be seen on many of these public television stations. Thank you for joining us. I'm Judy Woodruff. Good night.
Next week on Frontline, a special investigation of one of the biggest toxic waste polluters in America, the U.S. military. For decades, the Defense Department has dumped deadly chemicals into the ground, and citizens across America say they are the victims.
We have 23 cases of cancer, and I feel it's like a nightmare.
Watch Poison and the Pentagon on Frontline.
Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Frontline was provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Educational organizations may inquire about video cassettes by calling 1-800-424-7963.